Jerry Kane, retired Sergeant Jerry Kane, and I'd like to welcome you to another episode of the weekly roundup at InsideBlue360.com. We have a very, very special show this week. We're going to be talking about the impact of the current police or anti-police turmoil in this country on the families of police officers. We have two very, very special guests that I'll be introducing in a moment. Like we always like to do, though, we like to remember those officers who've died in the line of duty since the last time we recorded a podcast, and remember them for their heroism and their sacrifice. We get this information from the Officer Down Memorial page, which is odmp.org. It's an excellent site where you can read about these heroes and the sacrifices they have made. Since our last recording, the following officers have paid the ultimate sacrifice. Sergeant Craig Johnson of the Tulsa Police Department in Oklahoma. He died on June 30th of gunshot. Police Officer Jason Judd. He died July 1st. He served with the Peoria Police Department in Arizona. He died in a motorcycle accident. Chief Deputy Lee Weber of the Hughes County Sheriff's Office in South Dakota. He drowned attempting to rescue his own 8-year-old son, who was caught up in fast water. His son was rescued by another person. His body has yet to be recovered. This incident occurred on July 3rd. We really hope for the recovery of the chief, and this is, like, that's a really tough one, and we really feel for him and his family. The last one, this officer died on July 4th. Kind of prescient for our podcast today. Officer Anthony Dia of the Toledo Police Department in Toledo, Ohio. He died July 4th of a gunshot wound, and there's a recording of the police radio. It's gone on around the internet. You can find it if you look for it, where Officer Dia has been shot. He's waiting for backup to roll onto the scene, and he knows he's not going to make it, and he asks the dispatcher to tell his family that he loves them. Pretty tough stuff. We honor and remember those heroes. We think about them all the time, and if you'd like to read about them again, I urge you to go to the Officer Down Memorial page at odmp.org. So our guests today are going to discuss the impact of the current anti-police environment that's going on in the world. And I say the world. If you look on Twitter and social media, it's happening everywhere. We talk about the impact on cops a lot, but we're going to talk about the impact on the backbone of the cops, the strength behind the cops, the family that stays at home when the cop goes to work. We have Marlene Botta as our guest. She is an executive with the National Police Wives Association, and her husband, Tony, is one of the greatest detectives in the world. And we have Phil McCabe. Phil, you've seen Phil on the show before. Phil is a producer with Inside Blue 360. Phil grew up as a kid during some pretty turbulent times in the 60s. His dad was a cop back then, and it was very, very similar to what's going on now. And his information, his experiences kind of can inform and maybe help the kids that are growing up today with a dad or a mom as a cop, and they don't know what to say to their friends or say at school or say anywhere for that matter. So good morning and welcome.
Thank you.
Jerry.
Marlene.
Hello.
Your husband came on a job in July of 2001?
2002. July 1st, 2002. He started his 19th year, completed his 18th on July 1st.
Mm-hmm.
He became a cop. He did this job for free before he was paid by the NYPD. He was a Nassau County auxiliary officer for, I think, 5 years before. 500 hours of community service every year, got the award. And I was like, why are you doing this for free? He's like, because I love it. And I said, then maybe that's what you should do. And I was hesitant because we had a newborn at the time. And when he became an officer, she was 5, and my middle one was I guess 12 months old, and I didn't have my third. So my children have only ever known their father as a police officer. Like, okay. My oldest daughter's first steps were to the shiny badge on the coffee table.
Oh, that's awesome.
Which she proceeded to put in her mouth because that's what she wanted to do with it. So that's how her first steps were to his badge, which I think is super important that they have grown up with this their whole lives, my children. And now it was a hard one because all 3 of them, I have a 23-year-old that's getting married, a 19-year-old, and a 15-year-old, and all 3 of them came to us and said, we'd like to go to a protest. We believe in Black Lives Matter.
You know, I've got some left-leaning children, and it's America. It's certainly their right to think and feel that way.
It's not left-leaning to me. It's human-leaning. I mean, I think Anthony and I raised 3 strong women who have their own ideas and their own independent thoughts, independent of how we raise them. But the one thing that is continuous is that they do the right thing continuously, because they didn't go. After they spoke with Anthony and I, they came to us respectfully. They chose not to protest because I said, you're going to be on the opposite end of your dad. I said, if you go into New York City and you protest and it turns ugly, that riot line could have your father in it. Are you willing to have that in your life, in your psyche for the rest of your life? And they all said no, and they decided to donate money towards different organizations that help minorities instead of going and doing a peaceful protest.
Very good, very good. It sounds, I can hear it in your voice. It was pretty intense, I guess, having these conversations.
The betrayal.
Yeah.
The betrayal that was felt is real. I don't have any reason to feel betrayed because
right.
They were doing what I've taught, what my husband and I have taught them their whole lives, is to stand up for those and give a voice to those that don't have a voice. But in that same breath, read your narratives, read the whole book, not just the chapter that they want you to read. And I think that once they went back and did the research, they decided to go through it a different way. Plus, there is COVID.
Yeah, right. And like the kids are probably strong, but like I know I don't want to get COVID, and my mom-in-law is still alive. I don't want to pass it to her accidentally. How do you live with that? If God forbid something like that happens. Hey, yeah. Phil.
Yeah.
I'm guessing in the 60s you weren't old enough to go protest against the Vietnam War.
No, I wasn't old enough. And again, let's face it was the 60s, and my father was a cop, so I don't think I would have made it to the protest. Actually, my father came on in the 50s. He was a cop in the 60s. He was a cop in the 6th precinct, which, for people that don't know, covers Greenwich Village. And it was the 60s, so the hippie population was popular back then. So a lot of the protests and that sort of thing was going on down there. So it became the same kind of rhetoric that we're seeing now. A little bit less intense, but cops were pigs. That was the nickname for cops back then, and so you kind of kept it quiet. You didn't really kind of guess it that your father was a police officer. And back in those days, police officers really, as a rule, some exceptions obviously, they didn't talk about the job when they came home. And my own man was the original quiet man to begin with, let alone not talking about the job. It really wasn't until he got promoted in '67 to sergeant and we went to the ceremony, which was at the lower muster deck of the police academy at the time. And between the museum, and at that time, firearms had a museum on the 8th floor and stuff. I really got impressed with the whole police world type of thing. As a matter of fact, that's where I made my decision to be a cop. But afterwards, I kind of was more proud of the fact that he was a cop, and I let it out a little bit. But still, it was a time where you really didn't. And I knew other kids whose parents were cops, and they were doing the same thing. You just didn't, they all of a sudden you're a snitch and that sort of thing. So kind of kept it to yourself.
So, Marlene.
Yes.
Your husband is going off to the riots every night. I assume he was pulled out of the squad and put in a uniform and had his helmet, and he was either going
to the paper. Yeah.
Yeah, he was either going to the Barclays Center or he was going to Manhattan. I don't know how much it was in Queens. Was there a lot in Queens?
No, not really. He was sent to Brooklyn a lot. He was sent to Manhattan a lot, like Manhattan, like the entrance to the Manhattan Bridge, that beautiful arch.
Yes, yeah, they made a stand there one night, actually, I think, against the
they have a picture. They have a picture of the officers waiting for the protesters in riot gear, and my husband and his partner are in that picture. And I tracked down the photographer because that was the picture I gave him for Father's Day.
Very nice. Very nice.
15 by 20 of them, like literally like 300, the movie 300. There's like 12 of them waiting for this mass of humanity to come through.
Nice. Did he get hurt? Is he okay?
He's good. Thank God he's good.
Okay.
Like, I mean, he had bricks thrown at him. He had, thank God for that riot gear. I mean, in Indianapolis, I just got off the phone with wives from Indianapolis and from Kentucky. And Kentucky, they actually got told to take their riot gear off.
That's a struggle we've had here.
Yeah.
There has been a hesitancy by some supervisors to allow cops to wear their helmets. Not so much in the last, since 9/11 and stuff, but before that, it was very hard to get some borough commanders and stuff to allow that. As a matter of fact, they didn't even want them wearing their helmets during the '96 World. And if anybody remembers, there was a lot of stuff coming off the stands onto the field itself. But that sort of stuff that political decisions is disgusting, because that, along with a number of other decisions about equipment, it's just ridiculous. And they're putting all the cops in danger, literally in danger. So,
well, you don't know what you don't know, right? So those who are making the decisions do not know, first of all, what we as the families, and I'm not just speaking for spouses, I'm speaking for moms, I'm speaking for dads, because behind every officer is a whole family that loves them. Everybody has a mother, everybody has a father, everyone, may or may not have a sibling. There's girlfriends, every officer has a story in a family. And when you make a decision, a blanket decision, when you don't know and you've not walked a mile in their shoes, it's dangerous. It's very dangerous. And that's at the National Police Fighters Association. That's why we wrote the letter enough. That's why we are fighting the good fight in order to educate what it's like to be a family member. Because you know what? I can't speak to policy because I'm not a politician. I can't speak to law enforcement because I'm not a police officer. But I can speak to being a family member.
Well, I want to talk to you about enough, definitely. But I think you hit on a pretty interesting point, that the protective equipment that the NYPD gave your husband did actually do its job and protected him from serious physical injury during these disturbances.
Absolutely.
And I found it kind of amusing that when the disturbances kind of first broke out about a month or two ago, that there were leaders of the protests and politicians here in New York City who said that the police provoked violence by wearing the protective equipment. this chicken and egg argument where somehow or another the cops are at fault no matter what they do has to come to an end. Cops have a right.
You don't know.
You don't know, and it's not that the cops decided to go, oh, hey, I call up Phil and I call up your husband. And let's go down to the Barclays Center and stop these protesters because we don't like their message. We get sent there by the city leadership to keep order. That's it. We exist to keep order. We should be allowed to protect our heads. You get head trauma, you can die from head trauma. It's no joke.
I don't know if the picture was absolutely everywhere of the officer who had the brick thrown at his face.
Yes, the lieutenant from the legal bureau, yes.
And he happens to be on the board of Brotherhood for the Fallen.
Yes, he is. Yes.
And the fact that a person who so very much gives of himself to families of fallen officers, and I met a bunch of the guys from Brotherhood for the Fallen at LEO Weekend, which is a wonderful organization which you should have on your show, but I digress.
We always looking for other guests. We'll take that as a strong hint.
And we got to know them that weekend, and we bought swag, and what they do is pretty amazing as a charitable organization. And for him to be the first, like the kind of poster child for what could happen at a riot was right. To me totally ironic and painful. I
understand that he's healing quite well, by the way.
Yeah. It was painful to see the vest with all the blood.
Yeah, right.
That was painful because, therefore the grace of God go I, right?
I'm getting to know that you're pretty strong, Marlene. You let your husband become a cop just a few months after almost 100 cops got killed in one fell swoop on 9/11. That was
what he wanted to do. You know what?
That had to be hard. That's no joke.
If he's strong enough to suit up, I need to be strong enough to let him.
Well, you must be pretty tough. You and all the spouses and significant others out there at that time to become a cop was not easy. I would imagine when we come out of the economic doldrums and they put another academy class in, it's going to be a similar situation. To let your loved one go off and become a cop in this experience, in this environment, is not an easy thing to do. Tell me about Enough. You guys in your group, you see the politicians just vilifying the cops. If they can get in front of a microphone or get on a Zoom call and get on TV, they are killing us. What do you want them to do?
Well, we want to be bridge builders. We want to be strategic negotiators. We want to be the voice, and we can say things that officers cannot say. Because we're civilians, we don't wear the uniform. We don't have the badge to tarnish, so to speak. We are free to be the citizens that we are. We have a vote. We have a voice. And that's what the National Police Wives, and then NYLF, which is New York Law Enforcement Families Foundation, which is a foundation I co-founded with Kara Smith. Because New York didn't have a spouses group or a family group. Like they had one for fallen officers. They have one for like hobbies and stuff, but they didn't have a support group. They didn't have peer-to-peer support. 40,000 members strong, and we don't have a peer-to-peer support that's not attached to any entity. So we founded NYLF, which is an affiliate of the National Police Wives. So everything, since I'm on the board of both, we kind of mirror each other in very similar ways. And Enough is our rally call for bridge building. We want to have a seat at the table where the decision makers who are making these decisions about our officers, we want them to know, listen, behind every officer, we can humanize them more than anything on TikTok or social media, because I can speak to seeing my husband work until 3 a.m. and then go back in at 9. I can speak to him coming home and feeling like this is probably the worst time to be a cop in modern times, in this century at least. And it's heartbreaking. So we've had enough. So we want to speak. We want a seat at the table. We want to be able to say, listen, before you make these decisions about law enforcement, please consider this. Consider speaking with officers who have PTSD and could no longer do the job, had to retire because they are so wounded. You know, they are the walking wounded, so they no longer can do their job. So they've retired. We want people to we want legislators to have conversations with those who have lost loved ones to either line of duty or to suicide. Those families have something to say. They very rarely get to speak, especially the ones that have lost to suicide, because no one wants to hear that sad story. But it is a reality. It's a cruel and very, very real fact. And suicide has actually overrun line of duty deaths for police officers.
Yes.
So it's important. It's important to have that help, which I don't know if you've ever heard of Blue Help, Karen Solomon. She's amazing.
I follow her on either Twitter or LinkedIn or both, maybe. Yeah.
And the MPWA partners with her a lot. She's also a spouse, and you know, she's an amazing person. But we want them to kind of take into consideration. We want them to do those the shoot not shoot simulations, because when you're put in that situation and you don't know who to shoot or who not to shoot, the decisions that they're making are going to become more difficult. They're no longer going to be able to just make this sweeping change without the due diligence. And
yes. Like, you know, they don't see through our eyes, and that point, don't shoot it would be great. And it's my understanding. I heard years ago that some of these community leaders that are very much against us had been through the one up at the police range at Rodman's Neck. And I'm curious as to what the results were. I never heard of it. And again, I could be wrong.
Those studies, and that's part of the letter, is that those studies need to be made public.
Yes.
Who did you shoot? Who didn't you shoot?
I mean, it boils down. I mean, one of the things people say is, come right along with us and see how it is, because it's definitely different. And we're constantly faced with things like shoot them in the leg, shoot them in the arm. That's not real. It doesn't happen. Okay, we're not Roy Rogers, we're not the Lone Ranger. It does not happen. You can't do it. Even the best shots.
For our viewers who don't know what Marlene and Phil are talking about, they have computer-generated live shoot scenarios on a giant video screen, almost like a movie theater or a smaller movie theater, like a screening room. And they hook you up to a gun, but it's not loaded, but it still kicks like a gun because it's got pneumatics in it. And they usually have you do some jumping jacks or push-ups ahead of time, so your heart's racing. And you talk about like how it's a real-world scenario. And one I had, it was a car stop and two guys bail out of the car shooting. You can shoot back, no doubt about it. I emptied the entire magazine. And as the victim of the kidnapping ran away, I hit him right in the head and killed him. Killed him. I killed the victim. It was like when they redo the scenario, I fired 15 shots. I didn't hit the perps once, but I hit the victim with a kill shot.
Yeah, and people don't realize certain things, like cops don't. When it's all over, you ask like how many shots they fired. They don't remember.
Oh, I fired until I had slide lock.
It's like they don't.
Slide lock. Yeah.
They don't know. It's a heated, intense situation, and it's just it's not like television, and that's the problem.
Well, and once you get to be put in that situation, you have the adrenaline going. You have that 3-second window to make a decision. How many professions, you have to make a life or death decision in 3 seconds. You know, not a heck of a whole lot. Maybe a surgeon, a police officer.
I'll walk a surgeon back because my wife's a nurse, and unless it's emergency surgery in an emergency room, generally they have a game plan and they've considered these contingencies that this could go bad or that could go bad, and what would we do if that happens? You're 100% right. Well, cops face things that they are somewhat trained for, but usually that they're figuring it out in real time, trying not to kill anybody who shouldn't be killed and trying to keep themselves alive at the same time. The surgeon generally doesn't get killed by the patient in the operating room.
No, they might get killed by the patient's family if things go wrong.
Well, that's why they live in gated communities.
And also, we have to remember too, Marlene, you're saying 3 seconds. It's not really 3 seconds. It's less than a second. A second. 3 seconds is
a long time. Yeah,
it's a long time. I mean, it really is. And they don't have that time. They have less than a second to make those, factor in everything that they're observing, everything in their eyesight, and factor it in and make a decision. And it,
yeah.
Cool.
And a lot of what enough is that mental health for everyone, better mental health for the community, better mental health for police officers, but also protection for our families. Families in Indiana are having the blue line flag burned in their driveway. They're being followed home. I myself, when Lou and Ramos were murdered in their squad car, that Christmas, we were shopping, doing some late shopping closer to Christmas Eve than I'd like, and we had decals on our car, and we were at Roosevelt Field Mall, and it was written on a napkin. It wasn't planned. They just saw our car and wrote this horrific thing. I hope you like your pig in a blanket.
Wow. Holy crap.
I'm with my kids, all 3 girls. I get this. I thought it was a flyer. I go to look at it, and it chilled me to the bone. What do? I crumple it up, put it in my jean pocket, and get the hell out. And my kids are like, why are we driving around? And I was like, because I'm making sure no one's following us. But I didn't tell them that. I said, because I need to drive the mall. I just need to, before we go home, I just need to center myself. I can't go home after being around all that Christmas stuff. This is what I told them. Meanwhile, I'm thinking there's somebody following us and they're going to kill us, or they're going to kill Anthony when we get home.
So I want to inform some of our viewers who might not really understand. I know Phil understands, and I understand. Ramos and Lou, Wen-Jan Liu and Rafael Ramos were 2 8-4 cops who were detailed to the 7-9 and were assassinated in their car like a week and a half or 2 weeks before Christmas. So this is like literally these guys had just been buried. And the perpetrator who killed them, it was not long after Eric Garner was killed, and he was activated by these demonstrations, and he had written on Instagram or someplace that it's time to put wings on pigs, and he mentioned pigs in a blanket. He mentioned all this stuff. He put it on Instagram, and he drove from Baltimore to Brooklyn, walked up to the car and unloaded a magazine into the car and killed the cops. It was a chilling time for the NYPD. It must have been horrific to be married to a cop back then. And that was really a horrible thing that person did to you and your family. That is just unbelievable. I'm sorry that you had to go through that. You did a good job covering the kids. Well, I guess you've told the kids since then now.
Well, yeah, they now know. They now know that the story, and now we have no identifiers on our vehicles. We do not wear any blue line. I mean, I have a ton of police shirts because every fundraiser.
You're buying swag, you said at the law enforcement weekend.
We have a ton. Like literally, my husband's wardrobe is jeans and a police shirt. Like whatever police shirt comes out, he loves them. Like that's his wardrobe. And my girls love to sleep in them. So he buys like 3 of them, and everybody's wearing a police shirt to bed. Just that's just our family, right? But we can't wear that outside now. We can't afford to have something happen to my children. My middle daughter, actually, I had, obviously before TikTok was a banned thing or getting banned, had joined TikTok, and there's this trend on TikTok where you, there's a song called My Type, and you basically video your law enforcement officer in uniform either coming home or leaving. And I did it, posted it on my page, and my daughter runs down and she said, they can track us. They'll know our location. You need to take that video down because I don't want anybody to hurt Dad.
Wow. Jeez.
And I don't want my friends to know that he's a police officer.
Yeah.
Phil, were you worried about your dad getting hurt back then in the protests?
I don't know. My dad was a pretty tough Irishman. I grew up in Washington Heights. No, I had some concerns. Not a lot, though, to be honest. I can remember actually one day where I had kind of a feeling something might have happened, but it didn't, at least not that I know of. No, I didn't really have a thing. Although my mother, my first day on patrol, my mother said, if you're late, make sure you call me. And I just looked at her and said, he has to call you. I'm 24 years old. I'm not going to be calling you. And sure enough, I made an arrest. And the first thing that the cop behind the desk says, "Go home. Tell him you're going to be late." So it's, I didn't back then. And back then, the cops, they weren't in the danger that they're in now. Literally, I mean, it was a different time, and it's just, it's a shame how they're just putting it. I mean, Marlene was talking about the equipment. One of my functions as sort of control unit was getting equipment and making sure the guys were wearing their helmets, and we were testing different types of less than lethal equipment, and we also did the military surplus thing for the department. And at the time, primary reason was we couldn't afford some of these type of vehicles, and everybody's going, saying, away and take the surplus away. And my first question is, so let me get this straight. You're going to take something away that's going to stop the bullets from hitting the police officers? I mean, we're talking about armored cars and stuff like that. I mean, it's ridiculous. And same thing with the helmets. I mean, if you saw what was happening recently, in the beginning, where were the helmets? Where were the shields? Where were the horses? It's just the
horses.
No, you can't. You can't have horses now.
Wow.
Yeah. We weren't using the tools that we have.
Well,
and we've been training for years with these tools.
Well, the horses were a problem. The horses, and I will say this, and I love animals. So when a protester goes up to a police horse and smacks the rump of a horse and then gets kicked, it is now the police's fault. So
I love those videos, by the way. I've seen a few of those.
So I understand why they wouldn't, because the optics is really bad. But the fact is, if you see Mardi Gras in Louisiana and you see how those officers use the mounted officers use their horse as a tool, it is very effective. You're going to move out of the way of a 10-hand or whatever hand horse, and it's going to be a very quick moving because that thing's in your face. So it was a mistake not to use them, but I understand why they didn't. When
I was a rookie cop, not to digress, but it's like a war story type thing. I like rookie, like in NSU, which is this rookie unit. There was a riot at Madison Square Garden at a rap concert called Crush Groove. I'll never forget it because they were sending us in with EMS.
90s.
Just to take the shooting and the stabbing victims out. So this would have been one of the first ones. It was 86. And I got backed into a corner by about 50 of the concert goers who came out looking for trouble. I was by myself. Oh. And a mounted cop came in, grabbed me by the collar and galloped out through the crowd. I don't know how many people he ran over. And then he yells at me. He goes, "What's wrong with you, kid?" And then he galloped off to go do something else. But I was literally off the ground. I'm 6'2", and he had me. This guy was strong enough to lift me and control a horse and gallop it at the same time. This guy must have been a pretty tough guy. And if that horse didn't show up, I was either going to get beaten into unconscious or I was going to shoot someone. And both those things are not, anything that we're looking to have happen. So
exactly. And you know what, my husband
very effective tool. I remember the funeral in Brooklyn for somebody that was shot by the police. I forget the name offhand, but the mounted unit was very upset because they were ordered to stand there and watch as the cops were taken and beating. And when they came back to the Mo Point, they were very upset because they weren't allowed to help. It's another situation too, where some of the decisions by the higher ups were not good. Helmets being one of the subjects. Also, cops were hit with bricks and that sort of thing. And I have seen many borough commanders who are always very hesitant about using the horses all the time. And they're a very effective tool. That's one of their functions is crowd control as well as traffic. Marlene,
you sent this letter out, or your organization sent this letter out?
Well, we sent the first letter out to Atlanta after their blue flu. Okay. So what the MPWA, National Police Wives Association does is we offer peer support, critical incident training, relationship and marriage training for spouses and for family members, so they understand their officers' reactions to things. So our first inclination after the blue flu was it was clear that they were doing a blue flu, and I called our president, and she was calling me at the same time. And I said, she's like, "Is it confirmed?" I said, "Oh, it is 100% confirmed. I'm actually on with an emailing or texting with a wife that's husband just came home and that their radio is dead and that surrounding counties are refusing aid." And I was like, okay, so we put up on the web, on the Facebook page, we have 160,000 wives. We put it up, we said, listen, if you're in Atlanta, an APD wife or a surrounding county's wife, please get on this Zoom call. First night, it was something like 34 spouses that got on. And then the second night, and this is people crying, people upset. We have a therapist on with us. She's talking to everyone and, making sure that we're calm and everybody's got a voice and gets listened to. So that was like a 4-hour phone call. I think we stayed up with them until 2 a.m. Wow. And that was my first feet in the fire by baptism, baptism by fire kind of situation with critical incident. Cause I had not been doing this spouse stuff during 9/11 or during any of the previous incidents. So when I'm sitting here listening to what they're saying and we're talking, the second night, some dropped off, some different people came on because we wanted to give everybody a voice. And Kelly, who was our president, she says, we have to do something. So she wrote a letter, and the letter is beautifully written. And it quotes Dr. Bernice King on how we need to be bridge builders and strategic negotiators going forward. We need to be the change that we want to see in the world. We need to kind of step forward as the silent portion of law enforcement, which is we never really hear from the families unless they're dead. And that's kind of been our MO, stay silent, know your lane, which is the home front. But this time we were not able to sit by and silently ignore the decisions that were being handed down, and the decisions made by the DA to arrest and to pretty much convict that officer in the court of public opinion. So Kelly wrote the letter. We had that letter. We rewrote that letter like 5 times. We sent it to an attorney. We have an attorney on a police officer wife that is an attorney. We sent it to her. She looked at it, made changes. We sent it to a Columbia University professor of English to make sure, because some people, they love to nitpick. And once we sent it out, our members sent it out via email, and they sent it out via mail. Now 160,000, I think we broke their internet. I think they were jammed up for like an hour or 2 with their internet, couldn't get any internet service because they had so many coming in. So we jammed their internet. But they gave us a seat at the table. They put one of our spouses.
Was there a result? Excellent.
They put one of our spouses on the task force.
Wow.
And it's the only law enforcement voice on the task force. They did not ask any police officer or organization. They did not ask the union. They asked no one else but a representative from the MPWA.
That's fantastic. Wow, that's really impressive. Very good. Very good.
Now that letter is kind of the symbol. Each wife was told to put something from her state, or each spouse was told to put something from her state. So New York sent the Statue of Liberty with the words, "She is watching." Because obviously we didn't want to send patches because we didn't want to get anybody hemmed up. The job can jam you up a little. So we didn't want to put anybody's and when I say the job, I mean the entirety. I don't mean just the NYPD. I mean the entirety of the police.
All jobs are equally good at jamming up their guys.
Yeah.
Yes.
So my vision for this, which is it comes from my mentor Kelly, who's an amazing mentor, and Rendy. Both are president and vice president of the National Police Wives Association, have been through some stuff. So Kelly was there for Ferguson. Kelly grew up in Ferguson. Kelly's husband was ambushed after Ferguson happened, after Mike Brown was shot. Her husband was ambushed, and as a Black woman and as a Black officer, he was ambushed, shot. His vest saved him. They protested that he was shot in. And Black Lives Matter did. And she said, if Black Lives mattered, my husband's life should matter as well. And we're the United Nations. Our board is filled with every race, every color. I'm a Latina. Rindy, who is our vice president, who went through Baton Rouge. I don't know if you know about what happened in Baton Rouge. Their ambush.
Right after Dallas.
Right after Dallas, yes. So it happened, it kind of snowballed because Kelly's incident happened, then Dallas happened, and then right after Dallas, Baton Rouge happened. And Eric Gardner's riots started way before all that, right? So they were kind of like the kickoff, the impetus, the I can't breathe. And then that kind of just snowballed. So each one of us has intimate experience with the loss of officers. So obviously with Lou and Ramos, Kelly with her husband being ambushed, and Rindy having trained. She was in the academy training, and she lost 3 of the officers that she trained. And she's a sergeant. She's not only a spouse, but she's also a police officer. So she's a sergeant. We have a sergeant on our board, which I'm so proud of. Because when we lose our way, she's like, no, that's not our lane. Because she's the double role, And that is super important to realize that we're coming as a Black woman, a white woman, a Hispanic woman, and 2 Hispanic women on the board. And we're coming to you, different races, different backgrounds, different states, and we're saying the same thing. And you need to listen to us. that's where we're at.
Definitely. It's having an effect on so many people. It's a shame. And to me, it's like, I get it if you want to come against a police officer, but to go against their families is just, no, that's too much. And it's not right. It is wrong.
Hey, Marlene, how is Kelly's husband?
Oh, he's great. I mean, he went back. He's actually, he has his own peer support that's not affiliated with any department. It's not an EPA type of thing, Employee Assistance Program, EAP. I'm really bad with acronyms, and the law enforcement loves acronyms. He runs it's called Blue Hurt. And he's been literally Zooming with officers from all over the country and giving them support and letting them know we're here for you. And they have their own therapist on those Zoom calls.
Fantastic.
So it's almost like we have to take care of our own. Isn't that always the case though?
Yeah.
The family kind of always has to take care of their own. But this letter is saying, listen to us as community members, as women and men who come from all over the country, who represent every nationality. I mean, we've got some amazing women and men on our site, on our Facebook group, who contribute to the greatness that is this lifestyle, because it is a lifestyle. You can't just say, you can be a police officer's wife. Nobody ever teaches you how to be a cop spouse. You guys get trained on how to be cops. We don't get trained on how to be family. And that means moms, dads, cousins. Nobody trains us on the fact that you guys aren't going to be at Christmas. Christmas in our family is not December 25th.
I guess it's the 21st.
in our family, it's whatever day Anthony has off that week.
Right.
Thanksgiving is not the 4th or 3rd or whatever Thursday. I don't even know when Thanksgiving is, because Thanksgiving is whenever Anthony's home.
Right.
Birthdays. You don't celebrate your birthday until your father has a day off. That's just the way it is in our family, because you don't know. They step out of that door, you kiss them goodbye, and pray that they come home. And that's a lifestyle.
We had a guest on a few weeks ago. It was my old partner. We had him on because he had a terrible fight with COVID. I mean, he was this close to death and he beat it. But I was partners with this guy for 8 years. And once on Christmas, we made a gun collar, Christmas morning, and he took it. And every Christmas after that we worked together, I was up, and we never made a collar on Christmas. So even now, as an old man, I owe him a collar on Christmas. I don't know if I'm ever going to get paid. But I know your words are, you really eloquently put it well. You understand when your husband goes off to work that it's dangerous. But I guess what no one ever tells you is that he might not come home for 38 hours because he makes a collar or he's had a major incident and it's a complicated thing and he's not going to be released until they're sure that everything's buttoned up and they don't need to talk to him anymore about it.
How about as a volunteer? How about as a volunteer, an auxiliary cop? He didn't come home for 36 hours after 9/11. He was shutting down highways. So people, they shut down the whole state, right? So yeah. He was going from highway to highway, giving backup. I didn't see him for 36 hours.
Gosh. And he's not even getting paid.
And he's not getting paid. He's a volunteer.
God. Crazy.
So, so when somebody tells me, oh, your husband's a pig, or, oh, your husband's bad, I have learned, my favorite one is your husband's a baby killer. I have learned to never engage because they don't know what they don't know.
That's a good point. They're informed by catchphrases and hashtags and social media, and they really don't know. And boy, what you just said about baby killer, a friend of mine, I just had my 35th anniversary. Now I'm retired many years, but a buddy of mine who's still on the job.
Always a cop, though, right?
What?
Once a cop, always a cop. You can't unlearn that.
That's why I'm doing this stuff and trying to inform people. He's still on, and he said to me recently in a text, now I know what the soldiers coming home from Vietnam felt like. He's done the same thing. He's made sure his car, his house are scrubbed. He used to fly the American flag and the blue line flag. It meant that the blue line is there to protect people. Somehow it's turned into some white supremacist thing, which is bullcrap. You know, I'm going to give a little history lesson to people right now. The gray and blue, the gray and white blue line flag started out as SWAT officers who wore American flags. Because if you're wearing an American flag, there's red, white, and blue on your dark SWAT uniform, it gives the bad guy something to shoot at if he's trying to zoom, train in on you. So they wore a black and white or a black and gray American flag, so it was muted. And someplace in America had a death, a line of duty death, and they added a blue line there to symbolize the thin blue line between evil and good. There's no white supremacy nonsense. It started out among SWAT officers, and a blue line was added after a cop was killed. And it really was a powerful symbol. So, of course, it spread like wildfire through law enforcement.
You don't know what you don't know.
You don't know what you don't know. Gosh.
And that's kind of like the most prophetic thing, this is a marathon, not a sprint, okay? We are going to be in this for the long haul. And we have to realize that engaging in behavior that's divisive is not good for anyone, not for law enforcement, not for families, not for cops.
Right.
Law enforcement, when I say law enforcement, I mean in general, like all of it. Not good for government.
Right.
And not good for people, for the community, because you know what? What works best for the community is when you have a positive relationship with your law enforcement. When law enforcement are the ones that, when I was a child, my mom always said, if you get lost, you find a police officer and you tell them our name and you give them our phone number and this is your address and you write it down for them and you go to the police station with them and you trust them because the police are good. And I think fundamentally we have lost that. We have lost that in such a way that I don't understand how to get it back. But I think the letter Enough is a way to kind of bridge the misunderstandings and the misinformation that's out there about law enforcement and about what they do, and about how we need to be trained as families on how to react to things. We need post-critical incident training, because if my officer is in a shooting, what does he need? What does he need when he comes home after being interrogated and IAB and this and that and the third? I don't even know the procedure because Anthony's, thank God, has never done that, or gone through that. So no one trains us on this could be or this could happen. Riots are a critical incident, and they are at the pinnacle of adrenaline, right? And what happens when that adrenaline crashes? They come home and they don't know what they need. And we need to know what they need. We need to know the psychology behind it. What are they going through during the day or at night when they're going and in this critical incident? How do we make it better at home? Right? No one ever trained us how to do that.
So when Phil was a kid and his dad was a cop, and for the most part when I was a cop, there was no instantaneous transmittal of bad news via social media.
Yeah.
There was a kid on Long Island who got killed in a line of duty named Brian Moore.
Oh, yes, I know Brian Moore.
Got killed in Queens a few years ago.
Yeah.
And his father was on Facebook and like a cop group on Facebook, and someone posted, cop shot in, I think, the 113 he was working. Mm-hmm. His son was an anti-crime cop on 113 and was working. And he called his son's cell phone and it didn't answer. And he knew right away. In the old days, his dad would never know until showed up at his door would be a chaplain, probably a police chief, and like a family friend or something. So they would have figured something out. So they would have been prepared to support him instantaneously when they told him the news.
Yeah.
Instead, he got in his own car and raced to Jamaica Hospital and just showed up in the emergency room.
Because he knew.
Right. And he had been a retired cop. You know, he was a retired sergeant, like Phil and I. So, as you talk to the spouses around the country, I'm sure that you hear stories like this all the time about wives who hear about critical incidents. Maybe their husband's not even involved, but boy, it sure wakes them up and they can't go to sleep because they know.
We had an incident in a New York police wives group on Facebook. The chokeholds out in Far Rockaway. They put it up instantaneously, and the wife was in the group.
Oh my gosh. Oh my God.
And here she is looking at, and I'm not sure if she was looking at the time, but here she is. Actually, the president of NYLEF actually reached out to the admins and said, you need to shut this down because she's reading that her husband's an idiot. Like, because everyone's like, oh, can you believe it? Oh my God, this, that. Another one, we don't need this. Where did he, why would he do that? A spouse doesn't need to hear that.
Right.
Doesn't need to read that.
Right.
I think that social media is a blessing and a curse. I think that in this day and age, you need to, my husband always said, unless John calls you, don't worry. It's his partner of 15 years. And it's rare for somebody to be partners with somebody for 15 years.
I had one for 8, and that was a long time. So
yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, 15 is crazy, right? They went to the academy together. They were in District 20 together. They were separated for a couple of years when he.
They got back together again.
They got back together again. I call him Anthony's work husband.
Mike was my work spouse. No question.
Yes. And
it's a platonic marriage. Yeah.
It is. It's sometimes I'm jealous of John. Like, really. I'm jealous of all of them. I spend more time with him than I do. But you have to realize that unless John's calling me,
right,
I'm not going to worry. Or unless I get a phone call from him, which I always do, it's not me. Or a text, it's not me. I can't tell you how many times he's been on the news with the copter going, and we're looking at the news and my kids are like, Mom, that's Dad.
Oh, yeah, you know how he moves, right? Yeah, they can just tell. Yeah.
He has a brown suit. He doesn't have it anymore. He got rid of it because it was too pinpointy. And he was like, I'm not wearing that suit to work anymore. Because it was recognizable. You knew he was coming because everybody else is either in black, blue, or in plain clothes. So now he only wears black and blue. And he was wearing that brown suit. And my girls are like, that's Daddy. That's Daddy. Oh, my God. And they went onto their phone and were zooming, and lo and behold, that's their dad. So it is a very weird time to be a family member of a police officer with all of this instantaneous news. And we kind of have to shelter our families a little. And there's really not a good way to do that. My daughter shared something the other day that had ACAB on it. She didn't realize that it had ACAB on it. And my husband said, he sent her a text message and he said, if you feel like you want to stand behind ACAB, you need to get the fuck out. Excuse my French. You need to bleep that out, please do. And she was like, I didn't even realize it was on there. She took it down immediately. But that's the point. Like,
hey, let's be clear. Some cops are bastards. There's no doubt about it. There's 700,000 cops in America. There's probably a few thousand that are bastards, for crying out loud.
Well, and you know what? Nobody hates a bad cop more than a good cop.
Right.
Yeah. They tarnish the good name. Right. They tarnish the badge. And you guys as officers know this better than anyone. It doesn't change if you guys don't change, right? So you need to start kind of not accepting the behavior of the bastards, so to speak.
Well, I think so. You'd be surprised. I had not on the podcast, I had an off-air conversation with someone who told me that 90% of the tips that IEB gets, and even if it's an anonymous tip to IEB, they know what phone it came from. 90% of the tips that they get at IAB are from cops.
And that's nothing new. That's for years. I've heard that for years.
Really?
Yes, I heard that years ago. I heard it back in the 80s too. Yeah.
Yeah, and the cops are using the mechanisms that are in place to try and weed out the bad ones.
That's an awesome talking point for me. When somebody says, you know, that wall is the blue line, the wall of silence, the this, the that. If I can come up with that statistic, I love statistics. I love numbers. I spout numbers off constantly, especially in law enforcement. Like especially when the narrative says that, you know, cops are hunting down Black men and women to be killed. You know, when you look at the numbers, that just doesn't exist. Like it's not a thing.
Yeah, the numbers aren't there to justify that, and everybody that's presenting that fact is being constantly shot down. They're being fired from jobs. I mean, it's I mean, if you want to talk about freedom of speech, that goes for everybody. Now it's becoming one-sided.
Taking 9/11 out of the equation, because obviously that was like an insane event to be at. Probably all the times I risked my life on a job, 90% of the time it was for African-American victims that I was trying to save.
Yeah, but do you even care?
No, of course not. The call comes over, the house on fire, there's shots being fired, there's a person being assaulted, whatever it is, and you get to it as quick as you can, and you stop the behavior, and you get the victim to safety and render aid.
Anthony has never come home and said, "Oh, I helped a Black person today," or "I helped."
And it's the same. It's the same thing with arrests too, as Jerry will tell you. You know, a person has to get arrested to get arrested. The cops don't go, "Oh no, this guy we're not arresting, and this guy we are." They don't do that.
I had one shooting on a job. The other party was a Irish Catholic guy like me. Actually, he was a rich kid.
If every person walked a mile, and actually the MPWA is doing, we call July Blue July because of what happened in Dallas and what happened in Baton Rouge in July. So July is a really, and Kelly's husband got shot in July as well. So July is a really hard month for our organization. So for Blue July, we actually are doing a campaign called Walk a Mile in Their Shoes. So every day, from this July 7th to July 17th, we're asking family members to walk a mile every day for somebody that they love, somebody that they care about, a first responder, a family member, anyone that you think is worthy of your mile. And you really need to think about why you're walking. You know, what went through that officer or that first responder's mind. Like one of my miles is going to be for a New York City firefighter. I'm not going to say his name because his mom is a good friend of our family's, and he passed away that day, and he was like 24 years old, and he was like in the prime of his life, and his mom still wears his picture on a button every day over her heart. And one of my miles is going to be like, what was he thinking as he's going up those stairs? What was he thinking? Like, that's going to be my mile. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a police officer. It could be just a first responder. And that's one of my miles for Blue July is going to be for him. And it really is interesting. People are sending us pictures of where they're walking, who they're walking for. And it's unifying. You know, we need to find things to unify and not divide. And I think that's our message.
You are a phenomenal guest. I wish every guest was as good as you.
Oh God.
Your message, it's well thought out. It's meaningful. It's very, very significant at this time that we're at. You've been a fantastic guest. The website for your organization is nationalpolicewives.org. No underscores or dots or anything in there, no dashes. What's your Facebook page?
Our Facebook page is National Police Wives Association.
Very good.
We have over 160,000 members on that page.
Very good.
And it, honestly, it's the best and the hardest thing I've ever done is be a part of this organization.
Well, police work is like that, right? That's why when police officers die and you gather to remember them, you both laugh and cry at the same thing, because you remember it's not a bland existence being in law enforcement. Thank you so much for being a guest.
Yes,
You've been great, and I think we'd like to have you on again.
Oh, sure.
If there's anything that we could ever do, if there's anything we at Inside Blue 360 can do for your organizations, please don't hesitate to shoot us a note. Ask us to do something for you. Your mission is noble. It's awesome, and we want to support you and your fellow spouses. We think it's a great group.
I think Nylef definitely needs to be on your list. Kara Smith is dynamic. She actually, I would never want to do this and partner with anybody else but her here in New York City. And this work is tragic and beautiful all at once. Just like police work.
You know, on that note, I couldn't say it better myself. Thank you again for being a guest on our show. We'll definitely put up on our website all your stuff, and we'll be in touch in the future. Phil, as always, great to have you on the show.
Phil, it was so nice meeting you.
Nice meeting you too, Marlene.
By the way, both of you, I said it off the air before, you have great looking Zoom rooms. Thank you for your awesome Zoom rooms. I think it's better than mine, even though I gave you a shout out, Marlene. Look at mine.
You did, and you spelled my name right.
Of course I did. And thank you, everybody. Thank you for watching. Please join us the next time on the weekly roundup on Inside Blue 360.